Liz, anyone who listens to the podcast knows that you read a little bit.
I read a lot.
How many books do you read a year?
100.
Oh my God.
Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less.
That's
but
only
my goal
98
is
more than me. All right. So I sent you a link last night, didn't I?
You did.
What was it?
It was a link to a website from The Atlantic where I could search for an author in LibGen to see if their books had been used to train the AI models.
Yeah, mostly from Meta, although I think also from OpenAI a little bit as well.
Yeah.
All right. So you read 100 books a year. How many of the books a year that you read showed up in this LibGen pirated database?
Everything.
Oh, all of them.
Every book that I've
Could you
recently
find one that had not?
I could not.
Oh, Jesus.
So I'll tell you what I played with is that my dissertation is not in there. And nothing I've written was in there. So
Whew.
I'm safe.
I was worried.
But when I did search my last name, my husband's uncle did some publishing. He was a diplomat. And his Adam's cousin, who was the daughter of the diplomat, also did some publishing when she was in Haiti doing some medical work. And both of their names came up.
Did you tell any of these folks that they've been pirated?
No, not yet. But
Okay.
I'll tell them that Uncle Harry and Jeannie were getting a name drop here on the thing.
Okay.
But what did come to my attention is you sent this, and just yesterday, one of my camp friends is a published author. Her name is KJ Michiki, and she is...
Awesome name.
Yeah. She writes really funny, really sweet romantic comedy books. So she wrote The Book Proposal and A Storybook Wedding. I read both of her books this past year. I had no idea it was her until I saw her at a camp reunion. And she sends out a kind of weekly, monthly newsletter. And it was all about, the title of it was Stolen. And it was all about how, I know this person. I've known this person since we were young teenagers. And it's her work in addition to the fact that she has a full-time job. And this is work that she has poured her heart into that is really well received. And, she's like, my work is just stolen, just being uploaded for use in all kinds of ways. And when you really know an author, you're just
Yes,
that
personalizes it in a way that
sucks.
Yeah.
She's a great writer. She works hard. And not that other writers don't, but I know her. I've seen her doing crazy things at sleepaway camp, but also her books are great. So if you are looking for a fun rom-com book, go read anything by KJ Michiki. But yeah, her whole kind of thing this week is just
Oh, so the timing of this is really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And what really hit me is that authors have to do a lot of their own marketing. And she's like, the tools that I use to market are the same ones that are stealing my stuff. The biggest tool I use is social media. And they're the same company that owns these AI platforms that are just taking my stuff. And so it's really hard to swallow that I need to both give them my stuff and they're stealing my stuff. I need to use them and they're also stealing from me.
And they're training off of the social media data too. So it's advantageous to her, but it's also advantageous to them. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really, really interesting. If folks want to read more about this, the title from The Atlantic is The Unbelievable Scale of AI's Pirated Books Problem. And so this is the fact that Meta, again, but we think this is true of OpenAI as well and some of the other large language model AI companies, but Meta used millions of printed books, including every single one that Liz has ever read in her life, from Library Genesis to train its AI model, which is the Llama 3 model. Instead of licensing them legally, it's really, the piece is kind of upsetting. I don't know if she read it, but...
Oh, she did.
Yeah, internal messages reveal that employees found legal acquisition too expensive and slow. And some also argued that if they paid for this stuff, it's going to weaken their fair use defense. We're not legal experts, but all the court cases, this is true of the New York Times and Sarah Silverman's case, they're essentially claiming that this is fair use. They describe an AI model reading a book the same way that you and I would read a book, like we're learning. So it's part of the learning process.
Yeah, but I paid for them.
Yeah. So the Atlantic's investigation includes a tool to search the data set, which is what Liz was checking out last night. So we'll put the story to the Atlantic and the link as well.
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit of good news on this front. There was a piece actually just yesterday I think it came out on the 21st of March in TechCrunch. Microsoft is exploring a way to credit contributors to AI training data. And so they kind of unpack this from a job listing. So a recently circulated job listing reveals the effort, which involves Microsoft researcher Jaron Lanier, explores that training time provenance, which is a way to kind of increase transparency. The goal is to estimate the influence of individual data sources, because that's part of the problem. Once it's in the black box, it's kind of hard to figure out how to do attribution or compensation, because it's really hard to get signals on like what's actually in there, which is sort of scary. But this potentially could lead to recognition or, God forbid, payment for contributors.
Yeah, I mean, this comes when there are all these growing legal challenges for these models, including a really big one from the New York Times over AI models training on its articles. So some companies like Adobe and Shutterstock have compensation models, but most AI firms have focused on opt-out systems rather than direct payouts. So some experts view Microsoft's move as an attempt to preempt regulatory scrutiny or legal action, but we're really not 100% sure on what the motivation is. I mean, I'm imagining it's not all just because they want to be really ethical and kind.
No, I think they want not to get sued, to the bejesus.
Yeah.
That's a technical term. So if you want to strike back against this behavior, go out and buy which books by whom?
So the two books that I have read are A Storybook Wedding and The Book Proposal by K.J. Michiki.
I'm Matt Mervis.
And I'm Liz Rade.
And this is ChatEDU, a podcast about AI in K-12 education. In today's episode, Spring Tool Time with Abbe Waldron, we'll reconvene with our good buddy Abbe and chat about what's new in the world of AI education-focused tools.
But first, in this special episode, we'll do just one quick news hit all about higher ed AI use in the UK. And of course, we'll end with another AI Bright Bite.
I love it. All right, Liz. So this is a piece that actually came out a little bit ago, but it's interesting in lots of different ways. And there's a couple news stories that I think have scaffolded on top of it. So we wanted to come back and check it out. This is from the UK. This is really based off of a survey, but it's just one of these surveys that are quite eye-popping and catching. So it is the HEPI Cortex Student Generative AI Survey by Josh Freeman in 2025. This is a follow-up to the 2024 survey tracking how full-time undergraduates use AI. It's a survey of just over 1,000 full-time undergraduate students. And the adoption rates have jumped just a little bit, right?
Yeah, I'd say massively.
Yeah, what's funny is that I think the adoption rates were underreported last time. People are just kind of, it's growing, but also people just being more transparent about it. All right, so in 2024, there was like a 66% adoption rate in AI in the UK university settings, and now we're at 92%. And there's some key themes. Students are using AI in assignments and tasks. It also tracks student attitudes, institutional responses, and what they call curriculum stress testing.
I'm interested in that term.
Get the paddles out.
Yeah. So 88% of students use generative AI for assessments, which is up from 53% last year. So the most common AI uses are explaining concepts, which was 58%, summarizing articles, and structuring thought. And 18% of students say that they have included AI-generated text directly in their work.
Right in the assignment.
Yeah. So, And I don't know, underestimated maybe, but still almost 20%.
Almost 20%.
1 in 5
Yep.
students is putting AI-generated text directly into their work.
Yep. And we'll share in a little bit. I mean, they're feeling super anxious about getting caught, but 20% still there. So,
yep.
All right. So what are the top reasons that students are reporting? 51% saves time, right? And look, what was the piece last week that we covered from the Carnegie Education Report? AI saved me 5 to 7 hours of time a week. By the way, not in the lineup this week, but the Josh Shapiro, the governor in Pennsylvania, there was a piece on the Pennsylvania kind of government did a collaborative project with OpenAI, and he came to the same conclusion, like AI is saving government employees in Pennsylvania 5 to 10 hours a week, something like that. So, All right, saves time, improves work quality 50%, provides instant support, which I think kind of love, the ability to get feedback on writing or coaching or content. And there is a little bit of a gender and economic divide. Men and wealthier students are more likely to embrace AI.
Yeah. So with all of the use, though, there are top concerns for these students. So 53% fear being accused of cheating. And this is a
great number.
a real difference here. So women are 59% have that fear.
Let's call it 60.
Yeah. and men 45%. So
not surprised a bit.
Yeah. 51% of students worry about AI hallucination, so that wrong or even biased information. And 31% say their institution bans or discourages AI use. And there is still a lot of uncertainty around AI policy, and only 36% of students have received institutional support for AI skills.
Okay. So what's interesting is that the number actually of schools and universities that have policies have grown dramatically, but what we're seeing is not necessarily like literacy supports or, kind of guiding students, just here's the policy.
Right.
So that's jumped a lot. So 80% of students say that their institution has now, again, this is all higher ed UK, but probably reflective a little bit of the states as well. The 80% say that their institution has a clear AI policy, which is a big improvement from 2024. Although matching the kind of they haven't prepared us, only 30%, 29% basically say they're encouraged to use AI, while 40% say their institution discourages it. And just under 80% of students believe that their institution can detect AI use in assessments, up from 65% in 2024. I am seeing, kind of out on the road, that number is sort of interesting because more and more teachers are just recognizing that there's a lot of variability in the outputs. Like sometimes it's all probabilistic, right? Sometimes the AI detector's great, sometimes it's not, and that can't be the sole data point. All right, so what else is shifting here in terms of like student attitudes or their thoughts on grading?
Yeah, so 40% of students think that AI-generated content could get a good grade. So they're not even thinking that it's like gonna
probabilistic,
right? Do that well on an assessment, but this was interesting. Yes. 34% would work harder if they knew that AI was grading their exams, and 29% would put in less effort. So we can call it 30% and 30%, really. Yep. So a third of students would work harder if AI was grading, and a third of students would work less hard if AI was grading. And I was thinking about myself, and I think I'm on the work harder side because I'd be afraid that it's not taking any of my humanness into account and is just just doing the algorithm. Even if I knew that an article I was writing, so in a real world scenario, if I knew that an article I was writing for a journal was first going to be put through an AI reader to decide if it's ever going to see an editor, I think I'd work even harder.
Yeah, to me, it would matter a lot on who the professor was. Like if I knew that professor and I knew what their kind of grading style was and what their relationship with myself and the professor is. It's interesting. This is sort of a corollary. We're starting a pilot right now with Urban Assembly, which is a really cool organization in nonprofit in New York. We actually covered a story on Urban Assembly about this a long time ago, but they have a tool called Cafe, which is a video feedback system. So a teacher can put an iPhone in the back of their classroom, films them, and just like a football reel, right? It gives them real-time feedback against like a Danielson rubric. It's all for formative feedback. The administrator doesn't see it. So I'm thinking about that, like, because we're starting to have conversations with teachers about, like what will it look like you're essentially teaching for AI feedback as opposed to human feedback in a more, even if it's formative or a more evaluative setting. So yeah, it's in the water to me, part of the conversation, which is interesting. Now, this whole topic, right, kicked off an idea that we have talked a lot about. We just call it something different. We call it durable assessments. And how do you think about how durable is the task? Can an AI chatbot do it? Or like photomath or AI vision, which would make it vulnerable or durable? They are calling it stress testing. Which is really more fun. It's like an action-oriented, let's stress test the curriculum.
Okay.
So the authors have introduced this concept of stress testing assessments against AI. They explain that institutions should run AI tools on their assessments to see if they can easily be completed with little student effort, which is essentially our durable assessment prompt. If this is the first time you're hearing about this from us, go to skills21.org/prompts. In the curriculum area, you're going to see in the analyze bucket a really interesting prompt called like durable activity review. Yeah, so their solution is basically stop doing these more predictable closed booked exams where you're theoretically able to do the assessment and use AI and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And that we're going to do just more in-person, in-class assessment and more oral presentations, et cetera, et cetera.
More real-life projects.
Right. I mean, our argument is great. Like, let's think about new modalities or different modalities or mixing up the modalities in which students can show what they know as a response to this stress test, right?
Yeah.
All right. But it's getting weird out there, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you had a TikTok video that went viral. We may have mentioned this.
We did.
And
yeah.
this was essentially a stress test example. So just remind us what that video was about.
So it was about an AI bot essentially doing all of the work in a master's level health administration course. So the AI did the discussion posts, the papers, the assignments, and it was able to do all of those posts and assignments going undetected by teachers, students, and any sort of detection tool that they were using. Ultimately ended up with a 99 in the class.
Yeah, remarkable. So that's sort of interesting because the stress test is going to look different. I mean, basically any online, self-paced, there have been a number of interesting examples. We've talked about things like operator or agents that can log on to a system and move through a system autonomously. So if you got an online self-paced assessment, we played last week with Gemini Vision in Google AI Studio, where you can basically see the screen and talk to the screen and get feedback. So, it's going to get more complicated as we think about stress testing. And the folks at HeartFork actually did it's different lens here, but did such a cool story last week about this 21-year-old kid from Columbia University. I think it's about to get
kicked out. Is he still in Columbia University?
Sure.
He was very on the edge last week.
So kind of similar, right? Like he came up with this thing because what happens? Like you're applying for a coding job at,
any one of these huge companies, Amazon, Google, name a big company that has coding in it, figuring out how to interview for these jobs. And when you interview for these jobs, you are given a task to do, and you're supposed to do it, obviously, all on your own and code it. And I guess there's a repository of all of these questions. So if you are really motivated, you can go and find all of these questions and just learn how to do every single one. And you can spend 600 hours, he was saying, just sitting there learning them all. And so you could cheat already. And the cheating there would just look like studying really hard and memorizing.
How is that cheating?
Well, you're memorizing the answer to the task. You're memorizing how to code it instead of here's the answer of how to code it instead of going in, because what they really want you to do is go into it blind and having never seen this problem.
Oh, I see.
How do you code for this problem?
Oh, gotcha.
But you can already, but they all use the same repository.
It's like having copies of the test and studying it. Okay.
Exactly. So you could cheat by just memorizing them all.
All right. He thought that was BS. So what did he do?
So he made a bot that is invisible.
It's like an overlay, right?
Yeah, an overlay on your computer that can't be detected that you're using this bot to help you code the solution to these problems.
I think he's made $200,000, but he's on track to do like $1 million or $2 million in revenue this year.
Yes, that's what he said.
And getting kicked out of Google.
And getting kicked out of Columbia.
And getting kicked out of Columbia. And
but
it's funny.
He's also gotten tons of job offers from every single one of those
from the
companies.
places that basically said when he put this thing out, we would never hire you.
Correct.
Yeah, I love it. It's like I'd love to know where the GPT-0 kid is, who was at Princeton and came up with a tool to bust his peers using AI. I'm sure he's doing just fine too. Yeah. So did you catch, though, I thought part was so interesting in terms of the durable assessment is, did you catch what his recommendation was? Because Casey Newton said there was a little pushback on this whole thing and its ethics, but he wanted to know if this is a BS assessment, what would be a good assessment?
Right. Well, I think he was saying assessments that actually drive the job, because I thought he gave such a great analogy of applying for a job to be an administrative assistant, but first you have to show that you could do 10 push-ups, right? Yeah. That there's no real link, because the hosts were kind of well, then don't you show up for a job and not know how to do it? And he was like, no, that's not a task that you actually have to be able to do to work.
Right. So his contention was, you're exactly right. Give me a real world task. But it's really interesting because then he said, also give me an AI assistant, because in the real world, I would have an AI assistant, right? And let me do this coding task. Let me use the AI assistant and then look at the degree to which I interact with the AI bot in order to be more productive and efficient, exactly as you will do when I get to work. And it reminded me so much of, we talk a lot about there's the kind of grade the prompts and chat transcript, not the essay, to be provocative. Right. And you and I often make an argument those are both really interesting artifacts, but absolutely looking at the chat transcript and how a kid is interacting with a bot as they're brainstorming or ideating or getting feedback or drafting or whatever the case may be, that is probably the heart and soul of the skill. So I love that's where he landed in the world of AI. So, that's so much of this durable thing, right, is building a moat around the curriculum to protect it against AI. And what he's saying is, no, let me just demonstrate mastery and performance in that context. Roy Lee, we are on your side, brother.
Yeah, we are.
Keep up the good fight. All right, Liz. So let's come back to the study. Like, give us your summation here. Let's kind of put a bow on this thing.
I think faculty need to understand the impacts of AI. They need to understand how to build durable assessments and when to put up the walled garden, and not just focus on detecting AI use.
And over time, probably just like his example at the very end, partner with AI to demonstrate mastery, eventually, right, not take down the walled garden, cross the moat.
Embrace it and use it productively the way that they are in post-secondary, post-university, whatever. Like in the real world, it's there and people are going to use it.
Let's get at it.
Let's do it.
Hi, I'm Cameron Audia, executive producer of ChatEDU. Our AI and education micro-credential is full, thanks to many in the ChatEDU audience. If you'd like to join the waitlist for the next cohort, visit skills21.org/AI/micro. For school and district leaders looking to bring AI training to their entire learning community, ChatEDU and EdAdvance offers a self-hosted, flexible course that you can run on your own terms. This program builds a strong AI foundation for educators and constituents, covering key concepts, advanced prompting, AI-driven assessments, multimedia creation, and AI-ready classrooms. Interested? Email chatedu@edadvance.org.
Liz, we've had a lot of guests on the pod.
We have.
And your husband is like one of the most dutiful listeners.
Yes, my husband and my mom.
Yeah. Let me take off my glasses for effect. Who was his favorite interviewee?
Abbe Waldron, hands down.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
He felt that Abby's was just the most practical and the best for him as a classroom teacher. He was like, Abby came in, she gave us information, I was able to use it right away. He said Abby's episode was his favorite episode.
Really?
Yeah.
God, don't tell Jonathan.
Oh, sorry, Jonathan.
Well, the good news is that Abby is back.
Abby's back.
She's a colleague of ours just down the hall at EdAdvance. She's a professional learning specialist. And in the fall, I think it was the fall, right, we did tool time with Abby, and now it's spring. So now this has become our fall and spring event.
Teachers often ask us, like, what tool do you want? And a lot say Perplexity. And it's good to hear that that's your go-to tool as well because of the citations. And they're always looking for, like, which LLM should I use? And so it's nice that you support Perplexity too.
Yeah, and I think everybody has their favorite, right? So there are people who would probably rather use other tools than that. But for me, it works for what I need it to do. And I found it to be really helpful. And it is fun to demo for teachers as well because they like that piece because they're always wondering where does this information even come from?
Yes, we get that question a lot. Yes. Yeah. Is it true? And that helps cut down on the hallucinations that teachers are afraid of and students are afraid of.
I think so too. And I like that I can click to say, where did this come from? And maybe find a new resource for myself as well. I found that to be really helpful. And another one that I use a lot, I think a lot of teachers are starting to use this more, is Notebook LM.
My favorite tool.
Yeah. And I love how you can upload what you want to it. Right now, I'm working on curriculum. So we have units uploaded to it. And I'll often do some prompting around, like, what's the connection between the units so that when I'm working with teachers, we can really zero in on that progression of learning that happens between two units. Recently, I was able to prompt it correctly to write learning targets and success criteria related to units, which I found really helpful because sometimes that's an area that teachers get stuck in. So I think it's a great starting spot for teachers.
And what did that prompting look like?
I was trying something out, and it worked. I think I said, please create at least 10 learning targets and success criteria using this format. That's all I wrote was for the learning target. I think it was learning target, : today we are learning, and I just put ... And then I put for success criteria, the format is I can ... I had no idea if that would work, but I thought I'd try that. And it did. It came up with some well-formatted learning targets and success criteria. I still need to kind of go through and pick out which ones are probably the most effective, but I was impressed by what it was able to do.
Oh, that's great. And I know Notebook LM has the new mind map feature.
Some of the notebooks that I have, they're kind of the notebooks I dive into and work in all the time. So I wanted to see what that would look like and if that would be helpful for people to use mind maps. So what it does is it looks like it picks up kind of those topics and creates a quick mind map that goes outwards, so you can click and it expands. I think it would be a nice overview for people if you're kind of jumping into some of the work. Right now, you can't really change anything up too much in it. It kind of selects what it thinks should be in the mind map. That's been my experience. So I'm encouraged by that, and I'm hoping that they kind of expand how that can be used too.
And then what about the podcast feature? Do you use that at all? How is that going?
I love the podcast feature. I think once I'm said and done, like in there, kind of getting what information I need, I like to generate it, just even to listen to it. I find it fascinating how lifelike it is.
Yeah.
And I have tried out I think it's one that you can join the conversation. There's a beta version where you can ask the podcasters a question, which I was really hesitant to do because I wanted to have a good question. I don't know why I was nervous to ask AI a question, but I felt like it should sound good. And I did that and asked them a question, and it took them as long as it would take a person to answer, like, well, let's talk about that question, and they went into a great explanation for me. I think that it's a really interesting part of Notebook LM. And I kind of just think about how could students use that? How could teachers use that? I think there's endless possibilities in that. And I really feel like it's one of those tools that's kind of, when we're learning how to use AI, there's those things we need it to do to function. And then there's some really cool things that really keep us engaged. And I think that's one of those pieces that podcasting piece keeps me engaged and wanting to come back and say, like, this is incredible that it can do this.
Yeah, it really is something that it's still mostly a teacher-facing tool right now, but it's a tool that you can create some really great student-facing things, whether it's a study guide from your whole notebook or the podcast, and you can throw that into a Google Classroom and the kids can listen to it.
I think we'll see more and more people using that as it's part of the workspace too. And I do think that people appreciate that you get to control what information is in there. So we're talking about teachers searching just in a chat bot and wondering where the information comes from. They get to determine what that is. If it's research articles, your own units from your curriculum, you can put a website in there. I put in the Thinking Routines website from Harvard, and I was trying out to see if we could align some thinking routines to a particular unit, and it did a fantastic job. It picked specific thinking routines, and that website is huge, so I wasn't sure if the link I gave would be helpful or not. It was kind of experimental. Oh no, it extracted thinking routines that were directly aligned to that unit and the skills we're trying to build. So I thought that was a pretty incredible thing.
Yeah, it really does do such great work. And I think, college kids are using it. This is where I think we need to be teaching juniors and seniors how to use it as they get ready. Like maybe middle schoolers aren't quite there yet to know how to build their own notebook, but I think the same way we were teaching kids how to create folders in Google Drive now because they were online, like you can scaffold this so that they go to college ready to build notebooks. And it's much easier to build a notebook as you go along through the course and add your homework than at the end of the course be like, oh, I'm going to create my notebook now. Like, just do it as you're going.
And I think what's cool about that idea too, Liz, is that they have to do work in order to put quality things into the notebook.
Yes.
So we think about ChatGPT or AI just doing the work for students or for teachers. And this is a place where they get to practice those skills because, you could probably relate. There's so many times when I've used it that it hasn't given me the results I've wanted it to. And it's really because I didn't ask the right question, or in that case, I didn't have the right materials in Notebook to do what I thought it could do. So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board and do some critical thinking and say, what else do I need to put in here? So I see that being a really great way for students and teachers to learn more about how AI works.
Yeah, I just think about all the notes I take when I'm in class. And, when I think back to college, I did it all by hand, obviously. But now, like taking notes in class by typing it, but what you put into Notebook LM is what it's going to access. So if you don't have great notes or your notes are incorrect, it's not going to help you. And
Exactly.
so like there is so much great cognitive work that has to go along with putting it in. And I would guess that the same thing will happen is if you put too much in, that it's just going to get overwhelmed. Like you don't want to put your whole French textbook in or your whole history textbook if you're just looking at chapter 12 because it's going to pull too much information. So you've really got to be careful about how you create the notebook for it to be the most useful. You bring up such a good point about cognitive work that's going on there just to create the notebook.
Exactly. And I like the feature where, you check or uncheck what you're trying to kind of dive into. And I think we've all had that moment where we're trying, like you said, to do too much, like check off all the units, and that doesn't help. So we'll do one unit at a time. And that was kind of the magic recipe, was like one unit and then one request, and then kind of replicate that for each one. And that helped.
That's so cool. What other tools are catching your attention? Things you're still using, things that are improved since we last talked?
Yeah, so I checked back into Diffit. I showed Diffit to teachers a lot, and that seems to be a really popular tool. And what I noticed was now in Diffit, there's a section called Books, and so that made me curious. And inside Books, there are lots and lots of books that you can select from and go chapter by chapter for differentiation or to build resources. And they're not just copyright-free books. There are a lot of popular selections in there. And I thought that was really interesting and kind of a next level for Diffit. There's also a request Google form there. So if you're looking for a book and it's not there, you can fill out a Google form and you can ask for a book for them to, I don't know what their process is, but I thought that was really interesting. They're kind of open for that kind of feedback. And I could see that being a powerful tool for teachers.
Yeah, I'm on the book thing right now, and my favorite book I ever read in school was Tuck Everlasting. It's right there. I'm thinking of other books I read. Number the Stars is there. They're alphabetically listed, and I can see 1984 right on the top, A Doll's House, Farewell to Arms, A Lesson Before Dying, A Monster Calls, A Midsummer's Night. I mean, that's just, all of the series of Unfortunate Events books are coming up. So they're really, it's not, Al Capone Does My Shirts. I love that book. Like, these are real books that their kids are reading both in school and out of school. And that's great that you can then, I can kind of click on a book and it is asking me to select the chapter, the end chapter. I can align it to standards. I can customize the resources to different reading levels. So I can go up if I wanted, or typically we go down to support students that struggle with reading. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool to just be right here and see what's going on.
Yeah, it's an interesting addition to the site. So I'm encouraged by that in ways that teachers can use that to support students for sure.
Oh, it's so interesting. Like, I clicked on the Diary of Anne Frank and it doesn't say the chapters because it's not chapters, it's dates. So it says Monday, June 15th, 1942, and, end chapter, June 20th, 1942. So it clearly isn't just, it's aligned exactly to that resource, which is very specific. So, and then you just kind of click and it's bringing up all these different resources.
And then you can have access, a student can have access immediately to reading when you're talking about a group read or book clubs that people run in their classrooms. So there could be adapted materials that are really easy to do for teachers to give that access to students who need it.
Yeah. I'm seeing multiple choice questions, short answer questions, open-ended prompts, summaries, long-form summaries. Like, this is really cool. What are you using professionally what tools are you using that are mostly Abbe facing or, for your own professional learning?
Yeah. So one tool that I really love and I've come to rely on, it's called Perlego.
Okay. And it Perlego, right?
Yeah. And it's a subscription service. Kind of just stumbled upon when I was searching for something else. And what this is a subscription service that includes, they say, 1 million books. And they have a lot of the professional development books that I would typically buy are there, including things that are published recently. So it's a subscription that allows you to read any of the books that are there, and you can have a want to read and a currently reading list. And what I discovered is that they have an AI tool. I think it's called a research assistant, and it allows you to search all of those books. So I think the last time we talked, I was hoping that there was a tool like that out there in the world, because sometimes when we're looking in AI for things, we'll get excerpts or articles or things that are just kind of accessible. And I thought it'd be really helpful to have a tool that could look at whole texts. And there it was, right in something that I already had a subscription to. So I've been using that, and it's really helpful. It gives you a response to your prompts, but it also gives you a whole list of books where information comes from. So you can end up kind of going in and checking out a whole text if you want to as well. I found that to be really helpful. And really, any book I'm looking for, pretty much I can find on Perlego.
Yeah, I'm just playing with it right now. So the subscription it's a little bit pricey. It seems like it's $25 if you do month by month. And then if you do a year subscription, it's $144, which, I would guess that I spend more than $144 on
Yeah.
professional learning books each year.
Exactly. And that's kind of what got me into it. I did it month by month initially. And then I said, I do spend a lot more money than this on books. So let me just kind of dive in. And it's been a really great resource. So when the AI feature, again, has been really helpful. It kind of pulling together lots of ideas that are actual texts.
Yeah. I mean, I just put in project-based learning. It's a topic I'm a little bit interested in. And for the research assistant. And so now it's giving me like an overview of understanding PBL, the definition and characteristics, the benefits, the challenges, historical context, and conclusion. And then it gives me all these references of all these books that it brought this information from that I could then say like, oh, actually, I really want to read this book called Project-Based Learning by W. Bender from 2012. I click on it and it gives me the source. I can subscribe to, I have to buy a subscription, but it's all right there. And so then you can see again in the summary where the resources came from and then go like, oh, actually, that's the one that I really want to read, and I could mark all of these books as want to read, pick a few. This is great.
Yeah, it's a great resource. And it also has the ability on lots of them for read aloud, so that you can click read aloud in a book and it will read it to you.
And can you change the speed? That's always my thing.
You know what? I haven't done it yet, but I imagine that in settings you could change the speed. Yeah, to do that. But I like that feature was there because I think that's, again, an accessible feature. We're always looking for those in our tools.
100%.
For students and teachers.
And convenience. I mean, I read very well, but I listen a ton because I'm in the car, I'm putting rhinestones on bathing suits, whatever it is. Like when I'm knitting and I don't do very well doing only one thing at once. So like I love to listen when I'm doing my crafting, but obviously my eyes are on the craft. So I need,
that's a great
do so much listening.
That's awesome.
We're in a lot of schools in different ways than you are. You're closer to the ground on a lot of curriculum development. And, we see all these things. Magic School and School AI seem to be the two tools that are popping up the most. What are your thoughts on these wrappers that kind of have all these different bots and how teachers are using them? Are they helpful? Do you think they'll go in a different direction? Like, what are you thinking?
I think those tools have been really helpful in introducing teachers to AI and how it can be used. I think that's been really important for people to have a way to easily access AI and try it out on their own.
Okay.
I know that not all schools can have access to those depending on what they can afford to buy for an entire district. I think there's room for both those AI wrappers and for prompting. I think prompting is really important, obviously, in everything that we do. But I think that for people all kinds of adopters, we need multiple paths for them to get there. So I think sometimes those sites can be overwhelming in the number of things that you can do for some, but for others, I think that they can help inspire them to see how AI can be used, because I think just seeing like a kind of blank chat is overwhelming for people. Like, what would I even type in there? Right. And so I feel like for some, that's a great starting spot.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite tools that you use or that you're showing teachers in Magic School or School AI, or a favorite prompt that you're showing teachers?
I think that people really like things like the text leveler. Some of the things we just looked at in Diffit, like you can change the level of text. They do like that. They also everyone likes an email prompt or email chat, but an email chat that helps them write a better email. There's some other tools we've used. Like there's a free one called Goblin Tools. I think we might have spoken about it at one point, and it's totally free. There's all kinds of bots in Goblin Tools that help with language and tone. So if you're not sure how to say something in an email, you can type it exactly how you want to say it, and then you can change the tone so it's more professional, or I think it's less spicy is one of the categories. And I think that's really helpful for both students and teachers as well, a tool like that. That tool also has a magic to-do list, which I really like that one. I do tend to show Goblin Tools a lot because it's free. I like free things. And the magic to-do list allows you to create a to-do list that AI helps you kind of expand on that. So if it's like, my first thing is I have to write a lab report, you can hit the AI tool and it tells you the steps on how to write what has to go into the lab report. And you can edit that as well. But that's one of those tools I would say less of a wrapper tool like Magic School AI Magic School and School AI. And but it's one that does something similar that people kind of connect to those things. So again, I think that all of the tools have a place. Those are the decisions that schools have to make about their purpose and, where they're going with that for teachers and students.
I haven't used Goblin Tools before, but I know you've mentioned it. So I just put in the magic to-do list, and I need to send an email to micro-credential participants today, and which it just put it there. And then I had it break it down, and it made it super discreet. So open your email client, create a new email message, enter the subject line, add the recipient's email address, write a greeting, compose the body, include important dates, add a closing phrase, review the email for clarity, attach relevant documents, click send. So, I mean, obviously, I do not need something this discreet for writing an email, but I can imagine, like you said, like write a lab report for science. This would be great. A really great task list for students or teachers. And it looks like at the top there's all these
formalizer is the one, the email one, I think, where you can type in a message. And so in the about section, you can see that the developer of the site developed it for people who are neurodivergent in mind.
Okay.
So thinking of supports that people would need. And when I show this to teachers, everyone agrees they all need it. These are tools that are really helpful, and it's another great one to show because it usually makes them chuckle when they write exactly what they want to write in an email and then change it to something. I think it says, doesn't it say like less spicy or something?
It says, oh my gosh, the options. So you put in your email text and then make my text so more professional, more technical, less snarky,
yeah,
more sociable, more to the point, less emotional, more passionate, more sarcastic. Or into a single word. So, I mean, there's a couple other ones.
It's very funny. And we had a really good discussion with teachers about that because some of them said, why would you need this? And then someone else would pop up and say, oh, I definitely need that because I need to hit pause before I send emails. I need to have someone help me get through it, especially if I'm having one of those days. And they liked kind of the help that this gave them instantly to change their thoughts into ones that would be more acceptable to send.
Yeah, so I put in, this suggestion is not helpful. Can't you come up with something better? And to make it even more sarcastic, it came up with, oh, what a gem of a suggestion. Clearly, this is the pinnacle of helpfulness. I'm just blown away. Truly, who wouldn't want more of this brilliance? But I can make it, more professional. I appreciate your input, but I believe we could explore more effective options. Do you have any alternative suggestions? And that does sound so much better than... Yeah. I mean, it still gets across that I don't find the suggestion to be helpful and want something new. But yeah, this is
And we're talking about students
great.
Learning how to write emails. We hear that a lot, that students struggle writing emails to their teachers that are appropriate or that have enough information. And so this could be a tool that said, you can say the way you want to say it, but then let's shape it up a little bit here.
It looks like you can even, you can address the spiciness level, which is how strongly you want the text to come across. And so I guess it's not only for emails. I could put in a paragraph that I'm writing as a response to a question and get it to sound more professional. Or, I mean, maybe I'm writing a play and I do want the character to be more sarcastic.
That's a really good idea.
Or you said kids that are neurodivergent. And I can certainly see, I mean, what a cool tool you could use just as you're coaching kids through social interactions. Like, let's take this one paragraph and what does it sound like angrier? What does it sound like less emotional, more passionate? Like, this is a cool tool in so many ways. And I know you can do the same thing in ChatGPT, but this for a neurodivergent kid or adult, or just an adult in a bad mood.
Exactly. And people get a kick out of it. And like I said, if you're not really sure where to start, tools like this and tools that, or some of the wrappers are helpful because you're like, that would be helpful to me, or I didn't know it could do that. I mean, people are all still learning. We're all still learning, but I mean, some people are learning it in different ways about AI. So, and that's one, again, I always like one that you don't have to log into. You don't have to log in to use it.
I mean, this is so cool. There's one called The Judge, and you can enter in a text, and it says, am I misreading the tone of this?
And yes.
Wow.
So I worked with someone who used this with students, and the student came with an email that they were very upset that they received from a teacher. And they said, well, let's use this to see what the tone is, if you're right. Let's walk through this. And they put the email in there, and it gave them a really good assessment of it really wasn't a negative tone. It was more of a direction. It was more of I'm here to give you some feedback. And so that was a good conversation point for them that came through a tool like this.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I always think I'm in trouble. I rarely am, but I'm always, concerned that I did something wrong. And so maybe it would help me to throw it in. And conversely, I don't want things that I'm coming across to have the wrong tone. Exactly. So again, you can throw it in here and see, is the tone coming across the way I want it to feel supportive, not directive, or I want it to, I really want them to get that I'm like pretty mad about this and like they need to step it up. So yeah, I mean, there's all these different tools. Professor, give me the crash course. Consultant, give me the pros and cons. Estimator, tell me how long this is probably going to take.
I love that one too.
How good.
And that one is, I've used it when it's been really accurate, and other times it's just funny. Like you're like, that's probably not going to take 12 hours to do that.
Right.
So it's a tool to kind of look at critically, but it's helpful for people who need some help with organization and, being realistic about how long things take.
Well, let's see. I have to write an article that is 1,200 words. It says 3 to 5 hours. That's probably pretty accurate by the time I do the research, put everything out that I want to do. And
so it's helpful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is one of those tools that's just helpful. And again, I'm always looking for those on-ramps for people to understand what AI can do, because we hear so much information about AI all day. And I like to kind of bring it down to the place where, like, what is something that you could explore, at least if it's something that you're not really interested in or engaged in, because I think it can feel overwhelming. I hear people say things like, well, I feel like I'm really behind in my learning. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's always something new to learn. So we kind of look at it that way. Like there's always something new. We're all learning things every day. So this is a kind of a great tool to show to people to say, like, just this could be your one thing that you're going to check out.
Yeah. This time estimator with personal interest projects, kids always say the time management plan is the hardest thing for them to do, but ultimately the most helpful. And the reason is we say, like, from the beginning of the project, okay, now make a timeline.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've told them they have to do something new that they've never done before and have a learning stretch. And they're like, but I've never done it. Like, I have no idea how long these things are going to take. And I think most people underestimate the amount of time that things are going to take.
So
I think I do it all the time. I'm like, oh, I can get that done in 10 minutes. And an hour and a half later, I'm like, oh, yeah, that actually took me a lot longer. But I think if you could put in your personal interest project or even the steps of it and to see how long those are estimated to take, I think that would be so helpful for kids or for teachers. I mean, I know kids can't go on it yet, but like for teachers to sit with a kid and say, like, I see you're really struggling with your timeline because, you never have learned how to play the guitar before or any instrument. So like, let's see what that looks like. And, what is your goal? You are a total beginner on the guitar and your goal is to be able to play a Beatles song by the end. Like how long is that going to take? So you can turn your brain dump into a list of tasks. And then most importantly, what am I having for lunch?
I think that's a funny one thrown in there, but I think that's, again, it's a good cross-section of what AI can do. And it's really connected to us and it's relatable, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes AI doesn't seem relatable to people. And I think this is one of those resources that, again, it gets people to laugh. And every time I show it to a group of people, that it's mostly laughing because they find different ways to things to put in there and different ways that it could have been helpful to them previously. So,
well, thanks for being here, Abbe.
Thank you, Liz.
It's always a pleasure to talk and have you give us some tools. And I hope that in the fall we can do this again.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you.
All right. All right, Matt, now it's time to wrap up with another Bright Bite. Each week, we're focusing on areas where AI is making meaningful contributions in healthcare, the environment, culture, and more. And this week, we've got a good one.
We do. I love these Bright Bites.
That make me feel so
every
good.
single week, as I'm pretty much out on the road, you are very often too. I have a slide where I talk about, like, it's not all bad stuff after we talk about hallucinations and bias and deep fakes and intellectual property theft and environmental degradation. We need a little uplift.
We
right?
do.
So I always have at the top of my head some Bright Bite that we covered where AI is making a positive contribution.
So what do you got this week?
Let's see. This was a huge breakthrough. This was just announced, I think, yesterday. It was really focused around, and we've seen this, right? They're just getting better and better where AI is being used in cancer detection. But now we're at kind of like near perfect accuracy, right? So this came from Charles Darwin University newsroom, and researchers from multiple universities have demonstrated an AI model, which is eloquently called ECGMLP.
With a lowercase g, all the rest of the letters are capitalized. I'm sure there was a reason, but...
Right. Somewhere above our punching weight, even though you are a doctor. Yeah, so this detects endometrial cancer with 99.26% accuracy by analyzing microscopic tissue images. This significantly outperforms current automated diagnostic methods, which range from like 78.9 to 80%. So we're almost at near perfection here.
Yeah, the model also demonstrated high accuracy in detecting colorectal, breast, and oral cancers. So this research suggests the AI system could enhance clinical decision-making and be adapted for diagnosing other diseases.
Right. And there again, right, human in the loop. So it's kind of a partnership thing with clinical diagnostics around with these kind of imaging strategies with the support of AI.
Yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. Liz, I almost saw a little brush fire on the highway last week, and I remember the story that we covered in last week's Bright Bite, which was called FireSat, I think. Google put up these fire satellites. And we talked about how it would detect a brush fire the size of a classroom.
Yeah.
I was going by the highway, I was like, is that a classroom-size fire? But the fire department somewhere along Route 91 was already on top of it.
Excellent.
Well done.
Well done.
All right, Liz, I think it's time to
roll the credits. As always, we'd love to hear what you think. So please let us know at ChatEDU@edadvance.org. That's EdAdvance.org. And also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are using. ChatEDU is brought to you by EdAdvance, the nonprofit regional education service center in Litchfield, Connecticut. This episode of ChatEDU is sponsored by the National Center for Next Generation Manufacturing. ChatEDU is recorded, edited, and produced by Andre Angelo and Justin Pasco, whose dedication and expertise bring our discussions to life. ChatEDU's executive producer is the multi-talented rock star Cameron Audia. Additionally, we are grateful for the support of our colleague Gary Robinson, and we appreciate his time and talents. And of course, a big ChatEDU shout out to our fearless leader and executive director, Jonathan Costa, for inspiring the pod. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey exploring the thoughtful and innovative integration of AI in education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Costa, and I am the Executive Director at EdAdvance, and I want you to know how much we appreciate our listeners. If you enjoyed the podcast, feel free to explore EdAdvance's other AI services, which include customized professional learning of all kinds, conferences, and our micro-credential co-sponsored by the Southern Connecticut State University Office of Workforce and Lifelong Learning. Just visit skills21.org/AI to learn more. That's all for now, and thank you again for listening to ChatEDU.